My guest tonight is the Inspecting Judge of Prisons, Edwin Cameron, and former Constitutional Court Judge, Justice Edwin Cameron. We're sitting in Johannesburg's first prison that was built, which seems apt really for what we're going to talk about, and that is your work as one of the most important bodies for oversight when it comes to our 240 prisons and a prison population of about 150,000. One of the big shocking stories, if you like, or it's almost too unbelievable, is the one of Tebo Bester. And I was wondering how this has sat with you, having visited so many prisons during your tenure and probably not seen something quite as remarkable as how he managed to escape.
Remarkable is a journalistic understatement. I'll resort to legalistic overstatement. It was gobsmackingly, dumbfoundingly amazing. And that was part of the reason why it took so long for us to eventually make a move to get this into the public domain, because we thought we might be being set up. We thought there might be footnotes and hidden chapters to the story, because it was simply incredible. And as you know, I eventually took the ethical decision to start making information about it available to a trusted, close associate in the media. But even Ground Up and its editor, founding editor Nathan Geffen, was extremely skeptical. Their first report after I gave them what I had was in November last year. And they said there are 5 possibilities. The 5th and least likely possibility, according to the Ground Up first report, was that Tebo Bester had escaped and was alive and well and operating outside. Now that proved to be what happened, but that also shows us the danger of hindsight. We all know now what happened, but we didn't know it then.
Your office has no power other than to investigate, if I understand correctly. So when were you alerted to the fact that there was a problem at Mangaung Correctional Centre, which is run by a private company? It's one of 2 privately run prisons.
We do have the power of investigation, the power to examine documents, to go into any section of the prison, including South Africa's 2 private prisons, the one at Kutama Sintamule in Makado and the infamous one at Mangaung, rightly infamous, I might say. Well, we realized it quite early, actually. Our chief investigator is a very experienced official called Leonard D'Souza. And he said immediately, there's never been a death by fire in Mangaung. The prison's been there for 20 plus years. How on earth did this person either incinerate himself, or how did the fire occur that led to a death? Because it never happened before. So our reservations and suspicions and anxieties were triggered quite early. But if slowly the information came in, and still it didn't make sense. It only made sense on the basis of an impossible proposition, which is that with the collusion of what must have been very significant numbers and very significant, highly placed G4S staff, possibly departmental staff and operational staff, that they'd substituted a decoy body in his cell, set it on fire, and let him get out. It just seemed beyond any credence.
When you alerted correctional services and the police, and I think you also contacted the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Ronald Lamola.
And G4S.
And G4S.
Who was see no evil, hear no evil.
But they knew from the autopsy report that was not Tebo Bester.
They claimed not to have seen the autopsy report. Even the department claimed. Eventually Ground Up, a month or 2 ago, said the department says it hasn't seen the autopsy report. Here it is, and published it. So the autopsy report was available to us. I first became aware of it in August. The question still was, the autopsy report says this person did not die from smoke inhalation. This person was severely burnt, but there was no smoke in the lungs, which meant that it was an exterior conflagration which severely damaged the hands and the face, meaning that the corpse was not identifiable from facial features or from fingerprints. But there was nothing in the lungs. And the other significant feature of the autopsy report was that the cause of death was blunt force cranial injury. So clearly something had happened. We still didn't know whether this was Tebo Bester, who'd been bludgeoned to death before and then set alight in his own cell. The question of decoy only arose later and was still treated by us and months later by Groundup with a measure of complete disbelief.
When you approached correctional services and the police and G4S, what was their stance? What was their reaction?
The police were on the ball. We met with them eventually in Bloemfontein in February. We met with a high-powered regional task force of the police, and they knew their stuff, I have to say that. My criticism of the police is how slow-moving the investigation was. Would an on-the-ball Hawks captain or colonel have arrested Dr. Magadumana for the lies in the affidavit? We must explain to our viewers about that affidavit, and we'll come to that in a moment. But I think there were prima facie grounds for making arrests pretty early on, but they didn't occur.
Let's talk about that affidavit and some of the falsehoods that were in it. Take us through that if you can.
Well, there are a lot of quite momentous sort of Grecian, if one wants to be grandiose, aspects to this. And the one is hubris, which is a sense of arrogance and pride. I'm going to get away with this.
Leading to one's downfall eventually.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Dr. Magadumana, they obviously wanted to put the final touches to their magnificently, astoundingly successful escape feat. And the last thing they wanted to do was to destroy that corpse which was left in the cell in the Broadway wing, the ultra-secure wing, by the way, let it be said. Mangaung Max is one of the three most secure prisons in South Africa. And the Broadway wing is the most secure wing within Mangaung Max. So that they wanted to ensure that that corpse was cremated. So she went to the morgue and she sought the corpse, and there, one of the heroes of the story was a Constable Legoa at the Naval Hill Police Station, and he knew, his suspicions were alerted for some reason. I think it was because he knew that Dr. Magadumana had been there previously to claim other corpses. So he refused to give it to her. And in her sense of self-belief and pride and perhaps arrogance, if one could infer that, she brought an application. Now, she didn't bring it in Bloemfontein. This is where the refusal occurred. This is where the alleged unlawful act that she needed the court to help her against occurred. This is where the corpse was. She brought it in Pretoria, which before Parliament I called a skelmstreek. It was a sort of dirty ploy.
Yes.
A dirty ploy.
Yes.
To bring the application in Pretoria, which is 450 kilometers from where everything occurred, with the assistance of her attorneys. She's got attorneys, and those attorneys should also be called to account before the Legal Practice Council. She had attorneys who swore to the affidavit, who lodged the affidavit in Pretoria when they knew perfectly well that jurisdiction was in Bloemfontein. Now, Constable Legoa refused it, and she complained to the court. She said,
Brazen.
I'm a bereaved partner, and I'm in a tragic situation. I'm being treated in this terrible way. lodged the affidavit in Pretoria, and notice had to be given to the state attorney in Pretoria, who might not have been responsive to this at all. But they sent Brigadier Tswai, who I hope she won't think I'm patronizing her. She's a young legal officer in the Bloemfontein regional office of SAPS. She gets an SMS on her phone saying there's an urgent application tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock in the Pretoria High Court. And she says, what is this about? I want to see the papers. I want to respond to the papers. So she briefs the state attorney to intervene and to resist. And the judge presiding in the urgent court that afternoon postponed the application, didn't strike it off the roll, as might also have been proper, but postponed the application. Now that affidavit proved to be Dr. Magodumana's undoing. It's filled with falsehoods, demonstrable, verifiable falsehoods, and it took a massive chance after the sequence of massive chances she and Tebo Bester and all their criminal associates, their many criminal associates, had taken over all these months. This was a step too far that brought her to a fall.
It was Gayton Mackenzie, who's now with the Patriotic Alliance, but he's a former convict, and he played a large role in getting video footage out about abuses in prison. And he said he's of the view that it must have taken at least 30 people to concoct this elaborate scam of getting Tebo Bester out of prison.
It's probably an underestimate.
Really?
If you think that on that night at Mango Max, there were 23 people on duty. And how do you do something so astonishingly outrageous as to get a body into a cell? You obviously make sure that the video footage is turned off, which they did from 7 p.m. The night before. You obviously have to pay off some people. You obviously have to intimidate or blackmail some people. You obviously have to warn some people, look away. It's not in your interests to keep your eyes open. This is an operation beyond your remit.
The rot must have been systemic. It must have been absolutely throughout the prison. There's no ways it could have taken place otherwise.
Our viewers need to know this. We embarked on a terrible wrong turn early in our democracy. We start our democracy with this luminous moral figure, the world's most famous prisoner after 27 years in jail, apartheid's jails. He comes out, he's our first democratic president. We're going to do better. We're a democracy now. We have a Bill of Rights. We have commitments. Enshrined in Section 35 of the Bill of Rights is a commitment to people detained. And the fundamental commitment, together with quite a lot of detailed additional commitments, is that they shall be kept in conditions consistent with human dignity. That is embodied during Mandela's presidency in the 1998 Correctional Services Act, which is a beautiful statute. It looks forward to rehabilitation, to re-education, to reintegration. It says all the beautiful right things. What happens at about the same time is that there's a public panic about crime. And that's where we make our wrong turn. The Parliamentary Committee on Justice, led by Advocate Johnny de Lange, whom I like to name because these are individuals with strong personalities who led this. They took their template from Tony Blair's United Kingdom and from Bill Clinton's United States of America. And what template did they take? A disastrous one. Long sentences, overinflation of offences, compulsory sentences, taking away judges' discretion to fit the sentence to the particular circumstances of the crime. The result is that we have one of the world's least attractive carceral systems. We have the most incarcerated people in the whole continent of Africa, the 12th highest number in the whole world, total disproportion. What happens immediately is that there is a gross inflow of prisoners and the exits are blocked because of minimum sentences, because of compulsory sentences, because of the massive inflation in life sentences. So we had, in 1995, at the dawn of our democracy, we had 400 people serving sentences of life. Tonight, we have 18,000 people serving sentences of life.
So we have now this bloated maximum sentence section of prisoners. We had 400, now we've got 18,000, you say?
Of life sentence
of lifers.
prisoners.
Why is that?
Because of you and me and our viewers. We're all terrified. We are terrified of crime. We're terrified of violent crime. We're terrified of home invasions. Our fears are justified because the violent crime rate in our country is spiking. So we're desperate for solutions and we go for the wrong solution. The one thing I can say, having been a lawyer for 40 years and a judge for 25 of those years, is that length of sentence does not help. I can say that with total certainty. It's one of the few things we know about crime. Death penalty, no good. If we thought that the death penalty helped, there would be an argument for it. We'd have to say, well, you're right, the death penalty works. It makes murderers stop murdering or rapists stop raping, but it's still a bad thing. We'd have that debate. We don't even have to have that debate because the death penalty is useless. But what stops crime is the certainty of follow-up, detection, arraignment, and prosecution that we don't have. It's a terrible thing to tell you. In 2011, the rate of the number of murders that were successfully followed up to prosecution was 32%. It's dropped in 12 years to 14%. So this is a terrible thing to say, but we have to understand it. If 86% of murderers in South Africa are getting away scot-free, what is the point of having an overcrowded, unjust, degrading, vicious prison system that sends 14% of them for life imprisonment? We are so desperate not to drown that we're not stopping to learn how to swim. And to learn how to swim is to reform our crime intelligence system. We know where the people are who steal the copper cables. We know where the people are who are stealing Transnet's trains and a railway line.
Rails, yeah.
We know who the cash and transit heists are. We know who the ATM bombers are. But we need to find them. It's not difficult to set up an efficient, functioning crime intelligence system if you're honest about it. If you're not stealing all the money as happened under President Zuma. It's terribly dysfunctional. And crime intelligence needs the support from a corruption-busting entity which follows that up and goes into the office of the high-up and says you're under arrest. That's the way we stop crime. That's the way we stop copper cable thefts.
Yet it's been used as a political tool, and one of the big problems with our law enforcement and justice cluster is that the state is almost turning on its citizens rather than aiding them. That is one of the criticisms, at least. And then you have, for instance, you can sit in the magistrate's court for days on end and you'll have the same guy coming in without being able to pay 100 rand bail because he had a bankie of dacha in his pocket, and so he goes back to awaiting trial at Pollsmoor. That too doesn't make sense.
It's all symptoms of drowning. So we turn on the least likely culprits to make ourselves feel that we're achieving something, but we're leaving out the tough stuff. The tough stuff is the syndicates, the criminal syndicates who are arranging the zamazamas, who are arranging the copper cable thefts and exports, who are arranging the destruction of our railway infrastructure. Those are the difficult things, who are arranging the ATM, the detonations at the ATMs. So that's the tough stuff that we've got to do. And of course, It's been done. There's nothing in our country that can't be done. Hong Kong, I'll leave out Hong Kong's tragic last 5 years of history, but Hong Kong at one point was one of the world's most corrupt places. They tackled it. But there were 6 points. There's a well-known, they got in a British policeman to come and tackle the syndicates and the criminal gangs in Hong Kong. And of course, as in our country, those criminal syndicates and gangs had infiltrated political parties and political office and high up office bearers and power holders. And the British policeman deduced 6 principles that you need. And one of them, of course, is leadership. You need deep, deep, deep commitment from leadership. So all of that just to say that we are floundering. We're busy flailing our arms in the water as we're drowning because we haven't learned to swim, but we can learn to swim. The good news is that we can do better than we're doing at the moment. And part of what we can do better is to fix up our prison system.
Edwin, in the JICS report, there were also a fairly high number of suicides taking place in correctional centres.
We're very worried about the number of suicides because it's hunger strikes and suicides and deaths are all canary songs which, if they manifest themselves, are signs of danger.
One of the ways of suicide which I thought hadn't occurred to me was chewing the powder from inside a light bulb. One must be very desperate to go to such lengths.
Prisons are terrible. Prisons worldwide. The notion of prison is a terrible thing. They're awesome, forbidding, cold, inhospitable, cruel places. And so people are driven to despair in them. That's why we made these promises in our Bill of Rights in the statute to treat our prisoners better when Nelson Mandela was our president. And we're still not living up to that promise.
Just on a personal note, Edwin, if you don't mind, if you look back to 1994 and we move towards 2024, that's thunder.
Yes, it's wonderful.
This is a moment. This is going to be a big moment. So please make it special. But I'm teasing. But what were your feelings towards South Africa then and now?
We were filled with hope. We were filled with aspirations. We were filled with vision, and not wrongly. We undertook to ourselves, to our people, to do things differently, to do them better, and we have. In some instances, I'm one of nearly 6 million people on antiretrovirals, which are publicly provided. You don't have to show your ID book or your passport. So there's some things that we're doing right, and we can be doing so many more things right, but in too many ways we've betrayed all those promises, all those aspirations, and all those visions. But we can stop the betrayal and start again on the fulfillment. It's all available to us. We just have to set ourselves to it, and we need proper leadership to do that.
Do you think that that's a possible reality?
Undoubtedly. I have no doubt whatsoever. We've got outstandingly competent people. We've got outstandingly competent new voices in the political sphere. We've got outstandingly competent business leaders. We've got the initiative, we've got the enterprise. I have no doubt at all. This isn't pie in the sky at all. This isn't Pollyanna thinking. We've got competent people at every turn in our country. Where we are being failed is by our political class. And that can change. So yes, I think we can get there.
Edwin, thank you so much for all your insights and really for being a humanist for so many years in this country, and somebody who is now looking out for those that society has thrown away, which really is a great test, I think, of humanity. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.